This is the opening of my story, The Final Testament. It's based on a true life incident from the final days of Sigmund Freud, when the doctor was confronted by a Nazi officer who had learned some of his deepest secrets. The doctor's hands were trembling as he took the clutching end of the clothespin and put it in his mouth. On some days, there was no other way to negotiate past the pain that caused his jaws to lock up. Carefully, he pushed the head of the pin past his lips, up to his gums, and then tried to wedge it between his clenched teeth. Fighting back tears, he began to bargain. A dull, persistent throb he could accept if he could stave off the morphine and maintain a clear mind. The occasional hot skewer through the cheekbone could be borne, even as his eyes blurred with tears. What he quietly feared was overwhelming, incapacitating anguish that would render him finally useless and put the work of his life at a permanent end. It was the autumn of 1938, and the news on the radio was not good. The Germans had crossed the border into Austria in March, meeting no resistance. He had tried to tell himself that this could be lived with. But then had come the introduction of the racial laws and the decrees that all Jewish assets were to be assumed and properly acquired, and therefore subject to confiscation without advance notice. When they burned his books in the street, he joked about the progress of civilization. In the Middle Ages, he said, they would have burned me. But then the Nazis had shown up at the offices of the publishing company he owned, aiming a gun at his son's head and confiscating the financial ledgers. Soon after, the Gestapo had come to his home in Vienna without an appointment, leaving with 6,000 shillings in cash. After that, he had no choice but to call upon favors from foreign friends in high places so that he could find another country that would accept him and the rest of his family, should they manage by some miracle to be able to flee Austria with a few remaining assets. So now he was in London, and Hitler's troops had overrun Poland. On the radio, the Fuhrer was demanding the Czechs leave the Sudetenland. Back in Austria, the brown shirts were swinging clubs and breaking the windows of stores owned by Jews. The doctor's relatives, who could not get out, were being threatened, robbed, and beaten on the street almost every day. Such things could not be controlled or reliably contained anymore. At the same time, the cancer in his own body was spreading. He'd recently lost much of his upper palate and right cheek to radical maxillofacial surgery. To block off the space left between his mouth and the nasal cavity, he'd been forced to wear a large dental prosthesis he called the Monster, which caused constant irritation and made it difficult for him to talk. His speech, never euphonious, had become labored, nasal, and unpleasant to his own ears. But he refused to take anything stronger than aspirin for the pain. He was 82 years old. The manuscript for his last and most dangerous book sat 2/3 finished on his desk. He knew he would not be able to complete it with a fogged mind, yet some distraction was required to endure the discomfort and continue his writing.